So, hello everybody. Time to get started again. So, make your way to your seats. Our first panel. So, as you know, we've broken up all of the mini grants into panels, and many of you have mini grants that overlap into different sections. So we had to make some, executive decisions. You can blame me and Deb if you feel like you're in the wrong place. But one of the things that was actually really critical to the project was the engagement with what we're calling special audiences here. But basically, people who wouldn't ordinarily get to view these things or experience an eclipse. And so being able to have that as our first panel is really important to us. We heard from Sanlin that we reached 500 people that would fall into that special audience category. And so we've invited 3 of our mini grant recipients up here. We have David DeFelice, ex-NASA, and now representing himself, and I'm going to let you do the rest of the introduction. Thank you. Hope Church. And Donna Fishman, who's with Prevent Blindness, and Rosalie Wade, who is with the Frontiers of Flight Museum. You've all seen what they did. What we're going to do is, instead of spending lots of time on introduction, because we have a lot of people to get through, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I want you all thinking about what questions you want to ask, because this should be a conversation, okay? So I'm going to start with, just tell us a little bit about the audience that you were reaching out to and how you succeeded in meeting that audience. And I'm going to hand the microphone.
Hello, everyone. So one thing a minute is really not long enough to talk about all the things that we accomplished, and I couldn't be more happy with what we did. One thing I didn't really touch on was we have a partnership with Texas Women's University's Occupational Therapy School. So it was very important to us to have something for the autistic community. So we ended up being able to, and this was actually with funds that weren't AAS, but we were able to purchase an ice fishing tent, which we call our sensory tent. And we put it up in the museum for both Sunday, our pre-eclipse event, as well as the day of. And this was actually utilized both days by people in need of a calmer space. Another thing we also offered to the autistic community was just a sensory room that we have on site, as well a lot of tactiles. We were able to, thanks to AAS funds, purchase a 3D printer. Really love that thing. And create more tactiles for people to touch, and we're going to be utilizing that for both our summer camps, because since we are an aviation space museum, we often attract children with autism to our site and to our summer camp. So having things that are hands-on is really important to us.
Hi. We partnered with the East Coast Migrant Head Start program. So if you've heard of Head Start only serves, it's income-based, so it's all low-income students, and it's birth through up until kindergarten. So there's kind of home-based programs and then center-based programs. But part of the requirement of Head Start is family engagement, and part of it is health. So our work at Prevent Blindness, obviously eye health and eye safety, it really interfaces well with Head Start. And so we reached out to someone we had partnered with before, and I think that was really important, that we already had a strong partnership and we already saw outcomes from the East Coast Migrant Head Start program. And they have programs up and down the eastern seaboard, plus inland a little bit to the west too, as far west as Indiana. And it's where families go. So every family goes from usually I think 2 states, winter, summer. And so the families are really underserved. This is a really kind of ignored population. Most people don't even know about seasonal and migrant farm workers. And so there are a lot of barriers to healthcare. So a health issue might be identified when they're in Florida, and then they go up to Maine. So we really feel strongly about getting eye health services to those students, which is why we have partnered with them. And one of the things that we did was we had them choose. We obviously showed them the path of totality, but had them choose which programs would participate, and of course it was voluntary for them. And we made the materials in the languages spoken. So they put in their order for us how many materials they needed and what languages. And I was really proud that we obviously had produced everything in English, but also Spanish. And we pretty much produce everything at Prevent Blindness in Spanish. But then they also had a pretty good size Haitian Creole language speakers. And so we were able to get those materials translated as well. And, that's kind of an issue with translation and making sure you're using the right company. And so we're really proud of that, to get all those languages and have a good reach.
I think you'll hear a theme here in terms of partnerships. When you're working with special needs audiences, those types of things, those are the people who know their clients, their partners, the best. And if you want to reach out to them, it's best to do that. And so we did that through an organization called Medina Creative Housing that provides independent living with some assistance, and they've got a staff team that's really wonderful. And what we decided to do was to we did some resident enrichment programs to reach some of the residents that way. And these are mostly, there's some people with physical disabilities, but a lot of people on the autism spectrum as well. And so we did things like with them, like the moon phases with Oreo cookies, and they love that and such. But the key was I did staff training over the course of 2 days with all, I know it was like, I remember 125 of their staff members, because those are the ones that were going to be with the people in the program, on the eclipse day, whether they could come or not. And one of the things I learned was about, things you're aware of, but you don't realize that there's like the sensory thing overload for some of them. We had a fewer than we thought would actually come, because they just said, I don't think, when we told them, it could be 500 to 1,000 people are like, yeah, it's best if we just stay home. But then they had the experiences, they had the training on how to use eclipse glasses, those types of things to make them available. And but through the grant, we're able to provide transportation, because I think it varied from community to community. But some of the horror stories from 2017, a lot of people are saying, I'm just going to stay home. Well, we provided through the grant transportation. They had buses, but didn't have, that was like to take people to, little things here and there, but to mobilize their 5 buses to get people to the event so they could experience the whole nature of the event, the things we were doing, the yardstick, eclipse simulators, those types of things, and some of the art projects and all that way. So that was really important. Then we also were able to provide mobility mats, because we were out in a grass field, and springtime is, we call slush and daffodil season in Ohio. And so it was really kind of soggy still, so the mats came in really handy. And those are something that the Medina Creative Housing is going to be able to hold on to. They have things like horse riding programs, so they have horse paddocks and things that are sandy and all that way. So now they'll be able to have more mobility. So it's good that there's a lasting legacy there.
So I have lots more questions, but before I dominate the room, does anybody have any questions for any of our speakers so far? I have one back here.
Hi, it sounds as if this was the first time, I think for you, to work with, from the science perspective. Oh, this was the first time from the science perspective that you worked with the disability community, if I'm correct. And is this something you plan on doing in the future? And just how do you make those connections with a community that you have not dealt with previously?
Was that aimed at anyone in specific? Or?
I think, but all of them, yes. Yeah.
I'll start. For us, certainly, we have connections through our church with Medina Creative Housing, an ongoing partnership, but we never dealt with science. It was usually just, trying to get people to, volunteer. They have volunteer needs and those types of things. So, this was really inspired by the grant. As I was reading, somebody said, hey, there's opportunities for a grant. And I saw that, and it's like, what a great opportunity to be able to do that. Things, we could have done some of the science education things, but the transportation, mobility, we couldn't have done that. So to be able to put it together into a whole package. And I think it's opened up the doors, especially with my background working in NASA so many years, for future opportunities. I can, do regular resident enrichment programs and other topics and things, how to see the space station in your backyard, those types of things. So I think we'll try to build on that. But it was definitely a learning experience. Anybody want to contribute?
I'll just say, in terms of working with people we haven't worked with, I make cold calls all the time with other organizations, and for some, they don't see that vision is part of their mission. And so I think it's our job to make the connection with whatever the group is. This is how we can be a value add. That's how this education or this programming or service can be a value add. The other couple other things. One is make it easy. So our lesson plan was turnkey. We wrote the little book that they could read. We provided all the materials and kits and I saw several people provided kits so that it was really easy. And then free stuff. I mean, let's just say it, right? I mean, people like free stuff, so they're less apt to say no when they have no cost involved.
But then you also have to be careful with free stuff because sometimes people deem it valueless when it's really invaluable. So getting that out to teachers was the most important thing for us with all of this, was just letting them know that these resources are available, and again, making it easy for them to sift through, because we all love NASA here probably, and their website can be a bit of a beast to go around. So finding those resources, thankfully, there's lots of organizations that help us do that. And then just like reaching out to those partnerships that might already be in place. Like we were lucky enough to have a partnership with Notre Dame School, which is a special needs school in Dallas. And the students come and clean our exhibit cases. We don't trust that with just anybody. And these kids do such a wonderful job in just providing them with this. Yeah.
Other questions? Oh, one in the back there. Right, but we're broadcast. We have Zoom and we're recording.
Oh, absolutely. I'll use the microphone then. I also love 3D printing, and I wondered if you could just talk a little bit more about what you 3D printed. They looked flexible. What materials did you use, and whether you or how you see yourself using the printer and materials in the future. Thanks.
I'm sure I should have a student doing this.
Yeah, definitely. So mine actually wasn't the one that was flexible, but I was super jealous of whoever had the silicone little touchables. I definitely want those, but we were able to get a bamboo lab printer, which if you know 3D printers, that's like the super fancy ones where everybody's like, oh my God. But it uses a plastic. So NASA actually has a lot of resources already available. So first couple things that we printed were the far and near side of the moon, the lunar surfaces, which is really cool. The other things, we of course took advantage of their pinhole projectors. So it was the map of the United States contiguous. And then we also were able to find through Maker Lab a bunch of other little 3D printed pinhole projectors, which had like different little designs so that we could play around with that. So those were our big things. In the future, I definitely want to look for more tactiles, more hands-on things, kind of like, I don't know if anybody here has received the NASA booklets that have the Eclipse path. Like, I love that stuff, and we take advantage of that. We put those in our STEM night kits. Not 3D printed, speaking of tactiles, we made a sensory mat where you can push around like little palm balls and make your own eclipse. So you just kind of print, you put some gel in one of those giant plastic bags or Ziploc bags, and you can move stuff around. It's just a really nice tactile, and who doesn't love like touching stuff?
So we didn't need to do it under the grant because we had a friend in our church who has his own 3D printing, and he prints cookie molds for his wife's cookie business and all that. So I said, could you print up some 3D moons? And he found from the NASA website the 3D moons, and then so we had that available for the students, but even for the staff and all that way, it really helped, just to pass, we had several we just pass around and, what do you feel, what do you observe? Well, it's bumpy and all that. Well, that's how you get Bailey's beads and diamonds ring. So it was just, to tie that into the science that way was really helpful and helped, like, oh, now I understand. So it was good. So, and many libraries have 3D printers and such that way too. So even if you don't have the technology, check out your local library, see if they've got 3D printers, and download the NASA models and bring them in on a thumb drive if they don't have them already. So
getting really excited about 3D printers over here. We also got in touch with the community at Makerspace, so you should definitely look to see if there's anything like that in your area. They have all the cool toys.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Okay, well, I'm going to ask you one more question, and that is, this can be either what you should do or what you shouldn't do. But one of the things we're trying to do is save information for posterity for the eclipses that happen in 2044 and 2045. So what advice do you have for people going forward who want to do similar events?
I think probably the most challenging thing for some people is budgeting. So thinking well in advance and coming up with multiple scenarios, because there's lots of things that can go wrong, like, oh, you didn't get the funds in time, so now you have to plan faster and like know how much time it takes for shipping. And I'm guilty of this as well, so that's probably what I would recommend the most.
I think for us, we had people review the lesson. We created it a while ago, so we didn't have them pilot it, but we had them review it, people who were experts in preschool. But the feedback we got was that it was too high of a level, and the kids did not understand the eclipse. They love the sun, and they love the moon, and love learning about that. But 3-4-year-olds, it was probably a little better for 5. We should have made it an early elementary. So I would say to really pilot test, go through that effort if it's something for the public to make sure it's actually age appropriate. We probably would have had more uptake if we had it for school age. And then everyone talked about the time. And I'm trying to rack my brain thinking, how could we have done this better? But I really, teachers weren't thinking about it first. And so unfortunately, that was that. But I think that I love that we had the slant about eye health. So I think it's important to just keep that in mind for posterity.
Especially working with special needs, those on the autism spectrum, it's actually, it's a spectrum, right? So, but how much they really could comprehend and understand and do that way. So I would recommend, I wish I had more time and had already been volunteering with them and doing some things, or done, some of these programs I talked about I'd like to do in the future. If I had done some of those in the past, that would have been good. So, but it's good that it's got a new audience and all that way. And then when you're targeting things like English as a second language and all, we were planning on reaching migrants. We had migrant workers as well, but by the time we got everything together, they had migrated on to warmer climates, and so we ended up, instead of having more Spanish speakers that we were very prepared for, we ended up with more Ukrainian immigrants and such that way. So we were still able to use the visuals, but didn't have the Cyrillic keyboard and some things that way. So and then I was just surprised, some of the community partners that I thought were all dealing regularly with people, especially with all the immigration and such that way, would be more Spanish speaking. They're like, "Can you do Congolese?" And I said, "Sorry, not prepared to do that." So that's good advice there as well.
Okay, well, this was awesome. I want to say thank you to our panel. Let's give them a round of applause.